Welcome back. There's been no shortage of head scratching and criticism of President Trump's tepid response to evidence that Russia not only interfered with the 2016 election, but that they're hard at work on 2018. But President Trump is trying to turn the tables on the Obama administration, tweeting 2 weeks ago, Obama was president, knew of the threat, and did nothing. In fact, even members of the Obama administration have conceded that they could have done more. In June, the Washington Post ran this quote from a senior administration official. It is the hardest thing about my entire time in government to defend. I feel like we sort of choked. Denis McDonough was President Obama's chief of staff for his entire second term, and he joins me now. Mr. McDonough, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me,
Chuck. As a private citizen, no less.
A private citizen.
All right, let's start with the choke comment. Looking back, did you choke?
Look, we, during the course of 2016, became alarmed about what we were seeing, and became very clear to us what the Russians' intentions were. So we took a series of painstaking steps, including the president directly confronting President Putin, us going to Congress to press them to work with us to make sure that the states were doing everything they could to protect the sanctity of every American's vote, and then ultimately releasing a very powerful statement from the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence, calling attention to this threat. So we did exactly what we think we needed to do. And in fact, that discussion between President Obama and President Putin, we believe, was very impactful on the Russian actions. Some of the things that we feared they may do, they did not do.
Let me play for you what President Obama said about this. Was in talking what you just said. This was in December. He was recounting his conversation with Putin in September. Here it is.
I felt that the most effective way to ensure that that didn't happen was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out. And in fact, we did not see further tampering of the election process.
Based on the Mueller indictment of the Internet Research Agency, we now know that that is not true. We know the troll farms were working, particularly on, there were specific references to October 16th in 2016, November 3rd. At the time, they were the troll farms in Russia encouraged U.S. minority groups not to vote, things like that. Were these things you missed? You didn't know they were doing this at the time? Was his comment just about the election systems?
I think it is very important to recognize that there's two issues here, Chuck. One is the sanctity of the vote, that the voter roll, the individual going into that ballot box and casting a vote and making sure that that vote is counted. And we stand by our position that the things that we feared they may do in that spot, they did not do.
You really believe that that's what he got Putin to back off from doing?
I believe that I can tell you this. We had great fear that that was what they had in mind during the course of the summer of 2016. We had great fear that we needed to take significant steps to stop them from doing it. A direct confrontation with President Putin when they were both in China. We went to the bipartisan leadership of Congress to ask them to work with us to ensure that the states had what they needed. And by the way, Chuck, the lack of urgency that we saw from the Republican leadership in 2016, we continue to see till this day today. It's beyond time for Congress to work with the administration, to work with the states, to ensure that our electoral systems are ready to go. This is not a game.
I want to know, though, why did Director of National Intelligence Clapper and Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson go out by themselves?
For two reasons.
Why didn't the president? Why wasn't it the president flanked by his Director of National Intelligence? That would have elevated this to a level that the public might have taken even more seriously.
For two reasons, Chuck, and I can come back to whether the public actually had an opportunity through the reporting to understand exactly what was happening. But for two reasons. One, you know how we run our elections and our electoral infrastructure. It's by state and local officials who are partisans, Republicans and Democrats. We feared that if it looked like the president was involved, that this was a partisan matter. At the time, we were in the middle of the campaign. The president had a view in the campaign. And we wanted to make sure that partisan politics did not color state officials' reaction to the information. Point one. Point two is we also knew that the Russians wanted to undercut confidence in our electoral system. We did not want to play into their hands, and in fact, we didn't. And as a result, we had 33 states work with the Department of Homeland Security to scan and strengthen their systems. That ends up being very important to the outcome of the election.
When you're worrying about politics, the appearance of politics when you make a decision? Haven't you already let politics impact the decision?
No, what you're doing is you're operating in the real world, and you're operating with very sound intelligence, very sound analysis, after very robust discussion and debate of the question. And what you're doing is you're making an informed decision to ensure that you advance your interests, which we did. And those interests resulted in people making sure that their votes counted.
If Putin's goal was to elect Donald Trump, then how is it that what you did in 2016 was the right call?
Look, I'm not going to get into whether we know precisely what his goal was or not.
You're not ready. You're not as convinced as even Mueller's team in the indictment is that the interference was intended to help Donald Trump?
I'll let the indictment speak for itself. What I'm going to make is a simple point that says he wanted to do two things. One is sow confusion and lack of confidence in our system, and then he had a view on the outcome, is my guess.
So he's been successful on both counts.
Look, I'm not going to. I think that
we've sowed discord, and Donald Trump got elected.
And there's a way to address that, Chuck. There's a way to address that, which is Congress should stop with this stunning lack of urgency about this question, work with the states to strengthen their infrastructure, because only the states can do that. We can't. That's the way we run elections in this country.
You brought up the lack of sort of bipartisan urgency at the time. I want to play something former Vice President Biden said about Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell wanted no part of having a bipartisan commitment that we would say, essentially, Russia's doing this, stop. Bipartisan. So the die had been cast here. This was all about the political play.
Do you stand by what he said, that Mitch McConnell is the reason why everything was a lower grade, sort of everything that you did in 16, that you couldn't be as robust in a bipartisan sense because Mitch McConnell didn't sign on?
What I know is that the intelligence community approached the entire leadership of the Congress,
so-called Gang of Eight,
in early August 2016. Several members of that group did not take the briefing until early September 2016. Indication number one of a lack of urgency. Number two, the president asked the four leaders in a bipartisan meeting in the Oval Office to join him in asking the states to work with us on this question. It took over 3 weeks to get that statement worked out. It was dramatically watered down. You can ask Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, even the speaker.
And it was watered down on the insistence of Mitch McConnell?
Yes.
And nobody else?
Yes.
Okay, do you have any understanding as to why? Did he not believe the intelligence?
I don't.
You just know he's the one that watered this down. Let me ask you one final question. John Kerry, after the election, wanted to have the president, I guess, launch a commission to study this. You argued against it at the time. Do you still believe that was the right call?
I do. I believe the most important thing that can happen, Chuck, is for the institutions of this government to stand up and to learn some lessons from what the Russians wanted to do, and to strengthen our institutions to make sure that we can handle it. I think that continues to be the case to this day. In fact, that's why the president asked for the review that the intelligence community made public in early January 2016, also gave to the Congress, and briefed extensively to the incoming administration, because that information, our best understanding of what happened and what their intentions were, is exactly what the institutions need to do their job today.
Is there a single thing you guys would have done differently in hindsight?
Look, Chuck, I spend a lot of time worrying about a lot of different things at different times. Working with the information that we had, I think we've made a series of very important and very good decisions. And what I also believe is
you sounded the alarm enough?
I do believe that. Yes, Chuck, I do. I do. And look, we were just talking off camera. I still, to this day, am confused as to why from October 7th until Election Day, a series of private emails from an American citizen got more coverage in the American press than this very alarming, unprecedented statement from these two cabinet-level officials in the United States government. That's a question that we all have to take a hard look at. Yeah. We did it, our spokesman was giving briefings in the press room and raising this question consistently. And it was not getting the attention that we believe it deserved.
Dennis, you're a private citizen now. You're working for, I think, the Markle Foundation.
Yes.
And looking at something that I've actually talked with a lot of lawmakers about, which is dealing with the future of work. You're trying to make people fear artificial intelligence less.
Correct.
I look at the future of work and I think everybody's wondering, oh my God, what happens when artificial intelligence takes over all driving, for instance, and then that's millions of jobs gone. So the first thing about AI seems to be that. Why do you think we shouldn't fear it?
Well, so I don't think the first thing will be that. I think that will be a monumental change. I think the first things are already happening. You know, in fact, one big study said that 30% of the tasks undertaken in 60% of the jobs in the current economy will be replaced by automation.
Right.
That's already happening. So what's happening is people are already handing off to machines things that they do in their everyday job. You and I are doing it.
Sure.
And so the question becomes, how do we then ensure that the extra time that we have is invested in things that humans do best?
I look at this and it's like this same, if you actually look back 100 years, people were worrying about this 100 years ago when we were moving from an agrarian to an industrial economy. So it's not as if we don't have a civilization to study to see how we handle this.
Right. In fact, yeah, if you look back 100 years, we didn't have free public high school.
Right.
In fact, what came out of the transition from the agrarian society to the Industrial Revolution was full-time high school.
So what do you believe then is, what are you guys working on that is as we now move to this digital age and whatever we're going to call this new age, and I think we're all struggling with what it is.
Yeah.
I think the idea of a gig economy isn't a good one per
No,
se.
no.
What needs to come out of this?
Well, look, I think there's got to be reform across the whole system, right? Educators got to get better about how and how they educate and how much they charge for it. Businesses have to get sharper about the skills that they need.
Right.
And then workers have to be able to have opportunities to go get new skills throughout the course of their life. The idea that somehow you do all the learning you need to do and all the studying you need to do between, ages 4 and 22 is incorrect. So we have to restructure ourselves, including through online learning, through different kinds of colleges, so that people during the course of their life can go get additional skills.
Government is not. I've talked to a couple senators who are worried about this, and they say there's so many things that have to change.
Yes.
Before even government is ready for this. So government's not going to be there on the front end. They're going to basically be the reactionary aspect to this.
Yes.
Will that set us back more?
Well, look, I think we ended up with the high school because business leaders pushed for it.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with changes because innovators and educational institutions are pushing for new opportunities, and because consumers, parents, look, we have to deal with this question of what is tuition going to cost. We're going to make this kind of decisions based on where you're getting value. So consumers are going to make some changes, and then ultimately business leaders are going to have to push for change too. That's why we've pulled together this group of people to do this work.
Well, it's interesting work, and it's something that I'm glad you gave us a few minutes to share with it. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.